Thanks everyone for joining in for this afternoon call. We're very excited to have Mary Eldredge from the Chapter Ethics Committee today to talk to us about some ethical issues as it relates to COVID-19. We're hoping that this next bit of time is pretty interactive. There's going to be some questions for you all. We want to hear your feedback. In terms of continuing education, I'm just going to use the recording or the list of everybody who is on this call as CE purposes, so everybody who's on will just automatically get a certificate in the next couple of weeks. With that, this meeting is part of our regularly scheduled Aging and Gerontology work group, which happens the first Friday of every month from 1 to 3 p.m. Julie Weffel is our chair of that group. She is also on, and I know she'll probably have a couple things to say before we get rolling today. We do ask that folks, please keep yourself muted unless you want to talk. You can also use the chat box at any time today, or if you want to use the raise your hand feature, we can also use that if you have stuff to Whoa. I will turn it over to Julie.
All right, thank you and welcome everybody. This aging CE is something that we've actually been trying to get set up and accomplished since last year, actually. So I'm really happy that Mary's able to join us today. We were going to do this last month and then COVID hit. So I appreciate, Mary, your flexibility and working with us. Just to kind of remind everybody for the aging group, this is an open group, so anybody who's interested in an aging related professional interaction, we meet, like Dwayne said, the first Friday of most months. There is, you can go on, Dwayne, help me out here, you can go on to the NASW-Michigan website and you can sign up to the group by adding name to the Google Doc. Is that true for this group also?
I'm going to put that link to the group information in the chat box. So if anybody is on, wants to get added to that group roster, you can just click the roster link and then add your name and email address. And so you will get regular meeting notifications about the group.
Great, thank you. And, you know, this group, it's been around for a very, very long time and a lot of people have kind of come in and gone out, but we just want to keep it going. And any ideas or thoughts or concerns or issues that you want to share, you want to make sure that we touch on. As a group, we're smarter collectively than we are individually. So I encourage everybody to either reach out to Dwayne or myself, and we can set up for the agendas moving forward, anything that may come up. And we're going to continue to try to bring issues to our meetings that are specific and connected to the aging population. This is a very challenging time. A lot of our aging folks, of course, are very scared because they're the target of COVID for the most part. Even though we know anybody can get it, our aging population has a lot of extra fears for this. So there's things that we can do to help. There's challenges that are brought to us, and I would appreciate anybody if you run into a situation, let us know about it, and it can be something that we bring up to the group as a whole and kind of work through. So I think, let's see, I think that's about it. I want to turn this over to Mary. Oh, I will say about 2:15, I have to jump off the computer line. I will call back on my cell phone.
Saw what a monster the shark had been, with rows of shining, terrible teeth.
So,
jumped onto the island.
Alana,
off the shark.
Thank you. So at 2:15, may disappear. I'll join back on because I do have a client that I need to go see. And if we're still on the phone, I'll just join by phone at that point. Okay. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say before we get started and hand this over to Mary? All right, well, thank you, Mary, for showing up, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me for a minute. Okay. You should all be seeing a copy of a PowerPoint now. So let's get started, but please, anybody have a question or anything to put in, please, I'd rather this be more of a conversation than a strict lecture. So let's see. I will introduce myself to begin with. As Dwayne and mentioned, and Julie mentioned, my name is Mary Eldredge, and I've been on the ethics committee for about 4 years now, I believe, and I spent 2 years as the secretary, and then this past year I've been acting as the chair of the ethics committee. It's work that I find I have a lot of passion and joy for, and I love sharing my perspective on the code of ethics, and also challenging the social work arena to do a better job of educating and viewing the code as an affirmative, positive document versus like the old standard. How it was taught to me was it's kind of like the big book of no-nos, and really I find a lot of support and positivity in the code. So I've been at University of Michigan School of Social Work for almost 5 years now, and I teach field practicum courses, and I also do some interprofessional education. I'm just wrapping up a class that has nearly 600 students in it. That was a big challenge for myself this year, and they were students from the med school, the dentistry school, nursing school, social work school, and pharmacy school. So we've been having lots of conversations about COVID and about caring for people across the lifespan in these times. So I'm going to share a couple of case scenarios, and there are actually 3 cases that I've had something to do with just recently during the time of COVID-19. And I just wanted to share those. One, I don't think that they're terribly uncommon for folks, and 2, it's a good frame of reference when we start talking about the different elements in the code. So let's get going. The first case is Mr. H. He was admitted to a skilled nursing facility in December following a diagnosis of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. This diagnosis came after he had multiple falls and went into the ED to have a little gash on his forehead examined. And during that time, they discovered that he had this lymphoma, and it was stage 4. It was pretty advanced when he went in. And they recommended that he did not return to the home with his wife, but to go into skilled nursing care. And he's actually on, he's receiving hospice services at the moment too. He also has diabetes too. And then, like I said, he's got about a 10-year history with Alzheimer's. So this is not him. This is just a picture I pulled off the internet, but I think we've all saw lots of those if you haven't in person, saw individuals sitting in nursing homes and trying to still maintain connections with family, and what this means for these individuals' quality of life and mental health. The next scenario is a woman named Mrs. L. She lives alone in a small rural community that's an hour away from her medical provider, and she's having some blood pressure concerns, and has had some spells of fainting, and then from low blood pressures, and then some spells of intense headaches with high blood pressures. So she had been, previous to COVID, having frequent physician appointments with her physician, and now cannot actually go into the office for those appointments. So as a rural individual, she does not have access to the internet, and her physician has been providing telephone appointments for her. And the third scenario is Miss S, and she lives alone in an urban setting, and she reported to a volunteer that's currently living in another state that she was having some big issues. The volunteer was somebody connected through church program, and they were just doing wellness calls and then asking if they needed assistance with food or prescription pickups. And then there were some in-person volunteers that would drop off some supplies to the porches of the people that are calling into the church. She told the volunteer that she has congestive heart failure and schizophrenia, and that she has no medication, and that her oxygen concentrator is broken. So what has happened is actually Adult Protective Services has been involved, and a more local social worker, me, has been helping the volunteer navigate through some of the situations, and we've had multiple calls on a three-way, as well as having a call that involved EMS for her. So I think that these are some scenarios that we're probably seeing in our day-to-day practice if we're still practicing at the moment. But there's certainly situations that our people are encountering more often than not. So thinking about where folks are at in this time, are individuals that are all pretty much could be considered shut-ins, I suppose. If you think about the orders and the complications that each individual is experiencing, we have in the Code of Ethics, there are 6 sections to ethical standards, and the first one is responsibilities to the client. So let's think about these kind of cases, and I want us to think about what is this opportunity, what opportunities are presenting themselves to us as practitioners of social work, and what are some of the unique barriers and challenges that we're experiencing. So let's start with our responsibilities to the client. So thinking about these 3 folks or any of the individuals you've come across in practice, what are some new opportunities that you're all finding to provide service?
And folks can either unmute their line directly, or you can type into the chat box if you would like to participate.
Well, when I thought about it, I was thinking about this is a new opportunity. We've talked about telehealth for a long time, and there are a few handful of programs around that do telehealth, but in pretty limited scope, right? This is an opportunity, and some people will see it as a positive and some will see it as a negative, to practice telehealth and see a broadened application of it. I will tell you that Mrs. L, the lady that had blood pressure issues and doesn't have technology, she discovered she loved the ability that she could talk to her doctor without driving an hour in or finding somebody to take her to the physician, to the doctor's office. She sees a gerontologist who ended up, their first call, they spent over an hour together on the phone. I don't know that that's terribly common, and I don't know that that's going to continue, but their ability to really spend some time together was a new and interesting aspect for her, and she was scared of the idea at first. Like, there's no way I can get good care from her.
So Mary, this is Julie. I think one of the challenges that a lot of my clients, not a lot, but some of my clients running into, of course, is understanding technology and having access to it.
Right.
So a lot of people don't have the cell phones, they don't have the smartphones, they still have flip phones if they're that tech savvy. Other people just flat out don't have it, or they don't have the video capability, or they don't have the ability to really apply the technology. And so, and then even those who do, you get the screens that freeze, or problems with the technology, and so then they begin to experience feelings of inadequacy, I'm not smart enough. I never knew how to do this. I never worked with technology. And the frustration grows. They feel bad about themselves. And so then when you try to connect with them or even walk them through it, you're spending more time with the technology piece than you are with actually the interaction and problem solving or resource development. And so that can be quite challenging. I'm a private practitioner. My practice is to go to people's homes who are homebound, so mostly seniors and persons with disability. I'm still seeing some of them, but most of them I'm doing by video. That has been a barrier. They've told me about the same challenges with their doctors, with their nurses, with the other providers who are also trying to move to more telehealth. And I think for me, that's the biggest challenge that I see with the clients. And then how do we still serve them when there's that barrier? Like I said, I can go into people's homes, but some providers can't. And so then we're looking at a disruption of service and possibly at risk.
Exactly. So those are true barriers. And I would also add that it's not necessarily limited to seniors. For example, I live in a rural area, and I was hoping and praying that my internet would be stable enough to do this today. And I know a couple of my students that are in their early 20s live off the grid. So we're seeing these access issues. And I full-heartedly agree with the idea of trying to teach somebody new technology in a time that they're already overburdened and stressed. So ethically, we're looking at very challenging times, like how do we meet client needs and how do we keep ourselves and them physically safe. So what we can do is what we can do, in short, but also start thinking about, my guess is that most of the people on the call are interprofessional practitioners. Would that be a pretty fair statement? Is there any like true macro practitioners on the call? It doesn't seem so.
No, I'm clinical.
Yeah, I think most of the people on the call would be clinical, given the type of group this is. This is a time to start thinking about how do we interweave our interpersonal work with macro work. This world, I think one of the things that we can be sure of is that this world is going to change from here on out. It's sort of like anytime you cross a boundary or experience something new, it's likely to continue to occur. And
Keep going.
And this is, pardon me? Did somebody have something to add? No. So how do we move forward from this? We have responsibilities to the clients and weaving through that. There's also the challenges if you are able to get in touch with somebody. Do you have the privacy arena? Are they living in a home with a lot of individuals? For example, I just told the kids you can't come in the house until 2 o'clock. I've got young ones at home. They're outside with their father. And I'm like, nobody can come in upstairs. You can go in the basement or you can stay outside because I'm busy and I need something confidential, right? But also, what do we do when their needs are more complicated and they really do need service? For example, Ms. S in needing some assistance. Her condenser was broken. She was out of her medications for both her mental health and as well as for her congestive heart failure. A phone call wasn't enough for her, right? And we can think about also the policies right now, like the policies that are happening currently, which are the orders that lead to further isolation for our folks. How do we get involved and help our leaders understand and actualize the ways to intervene and to continue to support those folks. Any thoughts on that? I'll come back to that in a moment.
Mary, I
let's
did want to
briefly go
relay
through.
a couple of the things that have come through on the chat line.
Oh, sure.
I think
I can't see the
some folks
chat right
have-
now.
Sure. Some folks have commented that the current situation has provided an opportunity for additional collaborative work, increasing services to clients, with some clients who were previously hesitant to do teletherapy have found it have found it more natural and that they actually prefer it. This particular social worker, Pamela, says she's in a rural area and some clients drive an hour to 90 minutes away for general sessions. Some of the problems is those who have technology sometimes have difficulty problem solving. Example, iPads are difficult to navigate with those who have arthritis, or the other one, someone who works with the Medicaid waiver program, and it's been difficult with clients who are hard of hearing to involve them in their assessments by having them do it over the phone. So just a couple of thoughts that have come through so far.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about it as there's opportunities as well as those challenges. I've also heard quite a few people discuss, like, I was afraid of doing this remotely, and now I've discovered that this makes my life a little bit easier. Especially, I think, for those folks that are living more rurally, and the idea of not having to get out and drive the long ways, which in and of itself it turns into a barrier for a lot of those rural folks, whether they don't have transportation or they're now afraid of driving or have physical issues that are making driving more difficult. So I think what it does is challenges us to figure out how to practice in a different way. And like I was saying a minute ago, I don't think the world is going to go back to everything happens in person. I think we're going to have people that are counting funds and saying, oh, gee, look, we don't have to have this physical footprint of an office that's this huge. We can have people that are working from home and providing services in the community and still get the same fees or similar fees. You know, it always comes back to the mighty dollar, but so when we're thinking about, like, well, we're trying to provide good service to our clients, we also need to think about how are we being responsible to one another, our colleagues. And one of the commenters just said that more, that they've had opportunity for more collaboration, and that indeed is true, as well as the increased consultation. It's versus walking down the hall and talking to somebody. You have to have an intentional ability, reach out to somebody and say, to a colleague and say, hey, talk this case through with me. And perhaps this is going to stress and grow the appreciation for the interaction that we can have with colleagues, which we're in our standards, we're ethically bound to have a peer group to consult with. I think that's one of those positive pieces of the code that sometimes gets overlooked. And it's one of my favorite ones, is that we're supposed to navigate this world together and not be lone wolves, which also practice, including this remote idea, is forcing more and more people to be the only social worker on a team or now working from home. So the barriers and challenges, again, are sometimes it's difficult to reach partners, especially if they're struggling with some of the same technology issues that the clients are. It's also going to expose if there's a lack of connectedness or an underdevelopment of your own personal network. And how do we strengthen that? So when I teach entry-level MSW students, usually during their first class, I give them this visual that when I think about social workers, I think about sea otters, and I think that there's a good parallel to social workers, and often they look at me a little confused, like, why sea otters? So if you know anything about sea otters, they often sleep in the open ocean, and they travel in groups. And when they sleep in the open ocean, especially, they link arms together and they form what's called a raft. And they do this so nobody gets lost and nobody drowns. And to me, that's social workers. We have to link arms with our raft so we don't get lost and we don't drown. So I think this is a unique time that's going to force us to really take stock of those relationships. And I think we're all people persons as social workers, but I think this is a good time to reinforce those connections with colleagues and developing that network. And that honestly is, like I said, it is one of our mandates under the code, and it betters client care too. Any thoughts on our responsibilities to colleagues? Other portions of that section about responsibility to our colleagues is about making sure that people are practicing within their scope of service, and are a lot of supportive stuff around that. But it's an interesting section to read, and I think that most of the time when we look at the code, we often look at the first section, responsibility to clients, and infrequently do people move much past that. So let's move forward if nobody has anything else. Dwayne, is there any comments that we need to read?
As it relates to kind of our connection to colleagues, a couple of comments, one from Janice. Colleagues seem to be more available, which has been nice. Pamela says she's in 2 networking groups. We had to cancel our initial meeting in one, so the other one met via video, so it can allow for additional networking opportunities. And I can definitely say from our end at NASW, we've heard from several folks, both current members and non-members, who have just been so appreciative of having additional opportunities to network and to talk, including our earlier call today, our clinical peer support group. I think right now folks just, since we are isolated at home, even though many social workers are sometimes the only social worker at their practice, I think it feels like a different level of isolation. And so having more unique opportunities to network is going to be more and more important. And I know even some of our board members are planning to do more regionalized Zoom meetings for social workers in different parts of the state.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, we had our ethics committee call this morning, and I had been trying for the past year and a half, 2 years to get people to try doing a video meeting versus just a teleconference, and it had been met with resistance until COVID-19, and there was an overwhelming sense of appreciation, and everybody's like, can we do this even when we're back to work? Can we continue to do this? So I think that we get so busy caregiving other people, it's easy to downplay our own need. And so I think this is one of those opportunities, is to increase that collaborative and also consultation. I will say too, one more thing about that, the collaboration is, I don't know what folks' experience with adult protective services has been and how responsive they are. Does anybody find that they get quick results, or when they need to make an APS referral?
I'm not sure how to quantify quick, but at least in the southwest corner of the state, they do come in, and I've had good interactions and good results from APS.
Good deal. Good deal. I would say in Southeast Detroit, my experience, or not Southeast Detroit, Southeast Michigan, my experience has been, especially in recent years, when they are having one worker per county or one worker per multiple counties, is that things get screened out quite quickly. In the case of Miss S, though, it's been amazing the amount of collaboration that's happened with the APS worker that took that call. And that is here in East Michigan. She's been that APS worker has been highly involved in the care of that person. And well, they're still in the midst of everything, but has gotten the woman's medication, and her condenser is being addressed. And one of the details of the case was that she had not really had all of her care had been received over the last many years, as best that could be determined. All of her care had only been delivered through the emergency department, that she didn't have a primary care physician. So whenever she needed meds, whenever she got what she called sick enough, she went to the ER. So they're establishing her with some care, and also perhaps some guardianship services, trying to keep her in her own home and keep her as independent as possible, but also attending to her care. And we had response from APS the same day and got mobilization the same day, which was different from most experiences that I had had in the past. I think it's just an overburdened system, at least in this area of the state. So.
And Carol from the UP says she's had mixed experiences in the upper peninsula on the eastern side. And Paula said, I just hooked up an adult protective service worker with a face-to-face meeting with a participant. I was told they aren't doing home visits right now due to COVID-19. It worked really well.
Very good. So maybe it will help in some ways too, to some of these new ways that we're doing business. Let's see. So the next section is about our responsibility to practice settings. And I think this gives a great opportunity for us to grow our own expertise. I think, like you said earlier, that people have been talking about and dabbling around the edges of telehealth. And now during this period of our time, we're kind of being inducted by Hellfire for a lot of us, and you had to jump right into it. And I'm seeing lots of opportunities that folks are pulling together very quick to train individuals on telehealth and help promote good practice in that area. It's also a great time to be an advocate in social work. So both for policy and procedures, as well as for resources. Some of the tricky pieces are about storing your documentation. How do you document? Where do you document? Is it secure? Is it protected? Billing and coding. We saw Health and Human Services lift some of the restrictions for HIPAA and some of the billing. I'm not really involved too much in billing and coding these days. You guys would have way more to say about that, I'm sure. But are you seeing changes play out in policy regarding that?
Yeah, this is Julie again. There's been several changes. We were actually told, everyone was told, that the HIPAA guidelines could actually be kind of pushed aside when there was the movement to first start telehealth. But NASW and then through the private practice group, of course, we were discouraging this, reminding everybody of the Code of Ethics, which guides us as social workers to find those platforms which are HIPAA compliant.
Mm-hmm. Right. Are you guys concerned about if we get more lax on that, or can we go back, or should we go back?
I'm actually kind of curious what some of the agencies or organizations that people work for are telling them. Because, as you said earlier, there's many places where there's just one social worker. And so maybe they're not getting the same message as far as, you know, the importance of remaining HIPAA compliant, or perhaps there was such a rush in the beginning to get services out no matter what. But now that we've moved into, you know, a month plus of these requirements or these necessities, I'm wondering what other people, maybe not private practitioners, but maybe other gerontology social workers or even social workers in other areas are being told or encouraged as far as HIPAA and utilizing them in their work through video conference or even phone calls.
Does anybody have a response to Julie's question? This just seems to be kind of a slippery slope to me when I'm thinking about it. We want, you know, HIPAA came about for some really good intentions, and there was some really good intentions behind relaxing some of the elements. And like I mentioned earlier, is I don't think that we're going to go back completely to the way things were. So this is a great time for us to think about that and to help advise and guide about application and future policy. What would we like it to look like? If we continue to work remotely, then what? Jobs are probably changing. So thinking about that and how to keep client confidentiality, how to protect their information. This is a great time. How are we gonna do that? When I left my job, I have to operate under FERPA, which is the academic parallel to HIPAA. And I walked out of my office with my computer and files and things I would never have thought that I'd be living at home with as an office-based person. I wasn't set up. I don't have a private office space. We have a 3-bedroom home with 2 children of opposite genders. So how do we continue to manage? Mine's not HIPAA, it's FERPA, but it's similar enough. Are most of you working from home now? The few pictures I see, most people look like they are coming from a home setting.
Yeah, I've been completely working from home. It's definitely been an adjustment and a challenge with similar to what you're saying. I mean, my husband is also working full-time from home, and, you know, we both have fairly confidential jobs. So if something like this were to continue, we're constantly trying to manage, you know, like, okay, who's in which room and where's the sound machine go today? So, you know,
right.
It is a challenge, but I do think that it has some good opportunities, like we've been saying, for accessibility to some people who don't have it. You know, it's kind of like that double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, I'm a retired social worker, and I have a small job working for an agency where I'm supervising groups of social workers, and we generally do this on a visual basis. You know, one in a room with a group. And of course, since this problem has cropped up, we can't do it that way. So for about 2 or 3 weeks, we used one platform to do it visually. And the agency then decided that that wasn't HIPAA compliant. And they've been struggling for the last 3 weeks to find a platform that they see as HIPAA compliant. And in the meantime, we haven't been able to have supervision. So I think that this is a whole new area that agencies have to deal with and that they're not necessarily prepared to do.
Absolutely. Is anybody using a platform that's HIPAA compliant that they love?
I'm using telehealth. It's through my EHR for my private practice. They've recently revamped it so you can do more than one person on it at a time. At the beginning, you could only have one person on at a time, but you can do groups now. And it's been working fairly well. It hasn't really had, on my end at least, too many glitches or anything like that. And you can share your screen. You can, have video only, audio only, the whole 9 yards.
Thank you, Ashley.
I'm using,
Anybody else?
yeah, I'm using Spruce Health, and the reason I decided to go with them is not only do they do the telehealth, but they also have the ability to have phone and fax and email, which are also HIPAA compliant. And so I'm kind of moving my practice where the HIPAA phone number is going to be the one that is given out to clients. And so even those who are not doing video conferencing, if they need to call me, that phone call then is going to be a little bit more protected. And then working in the home, I did this several years ago. My children are all, both over the age of 18. And so I put them through a HIPAA compliance training and had them sign off that, anything that they might overhear within the household or with me talking to my clients is protected HIPAA information, and that they are bound by responsibilities to HIPAA. So, and they both, my son's actually just graduated with his BSW, and my daughter's in the health field, so they understand HIPAA. And that was just something that I just kind of added a while back, just so that I had it kind of in, if I ever got audited, to make sure if I was overheard in the household, at least those people who are hearing it are bound by rules of HIPAA, if that's even possible.
That's
I
a
love
great
the idea that
suggestion,
you
Julie.
trained your children on HIPAA.
Yeah. Yeah.
A couple of the folks on the line also mentioned Doxy as a platform, and I know that that's something that I've heard from quite a few social workers as well.
What was that called, Dwayne?
Doxy, D-O-X-Y.
Oh, yep, I've heard about Doxy too. I've heard people have pretty good luck with that one. Harriet, has that been helpful? You're muted, Harriet.
There you go. It's not my issue, it's the agency issue. So the agency has to come up with a platform that they consider acceptable.
Right, right.
And I suspect
That's an interesting thing too.
I suspect that there are many agencies struggling with this.
Yeah, yeah.
Mary,
Karen was.
I was going to say that I used, actually, this is Karen Monson. Actually, my position, I had heard that a lot about Doxy and its ease of use. And actually, I had a physician's appointment, and the ease of use was phenomenal. So if anybody's considering a platform, we utilize Zoom, and we have a HIPAA compliant licenses and all of that. We've been using that for a few years, but I really was impressed with Doxy and its ease of use.
and Mary, something that maybe you can clarify, but something that we were hearing a lot of in the beginning of all of this was that if you're using a platform for video health or telehealth, that we needed, for HIPAA compliance, we need to have a BAA to go along with that.
I'll have to look, and I will get that information and email it out.
Yeah.
And it looks like from the comments, Doxy does offer BAA.
Yeah, Doxy does. There's also TheraPlatform, Simple Practice. There's All Call Technologies. This was something that we had talked about in the April private practice group. We had put some together. And then of course, Doxy and Spruce Health.
Nice. I was speaking with one of my colleagues on the ethics committee, and we're putting together some materials about administrative response to orders in pandemic type situations like this in case it happens again. Like, what's the employer's responsibility to employees to make them ready to be able to work at home? For example, do they give you a laptop that you can use? Do they pay for a phone line that you could use? Do they subscribe to the adequate platforms? Like Harriet was mentioning, if they still have people doing care, but they're not providing supervision, that's an ethical consideration and concern right there. So what are they doing, and what are kind of emergency preparedness is happening at agencies and organizations? Our world has changed and we need to be responsive to that. This is a good time to voice concerns and to advocate for your needs as a practitioner and your client's needs in receiving services in the event that this happens again, which come this fall, it's very likely if we ever get back to work. So let me move forward. So our responsibilities as professionals, that's the next piece. And this is an opportunity to increase our own competence. We've been talking about a lot of tech stuff that's new to most of us. How do we gain competence in providing telehealth services? There's opportunities for us to add to the body of knowledge through our own writings and presentations, even op-ed pieces. This is a great time to get that out there and to grow the body and the overarching thought process of the profession about how do we provide services in a ethical and effective manner from now and well into the future, as we experience all these changes into the old ways. The barriers, of course, are our lack of preparedness, which we've talked a lot about. What we haven't talked much about is about how triggering this kind of situation is for us as the providers. And are we mentally and emotionally also fit to rise to the occasion to give? What about thoughts about that?
I will say I struggle with anxiety to begin with, and the first 2 to 3 weeks of all of this happening, I was a mess and not in a place where I was serving my clients well. But you know, now that it's kind of becoming second nature, and I'm kind of wrapping my head around everything that's happening, I feel like I'm in a better place and I can see the difference in how I'm interacting with my clients and the benefits that they're getting out of it versus where I was at the first couple of weeks of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I appreciate that, Victoria. I think we're in a unique time where it's always been the case that the people that do traumatic incident processing in organizations like the hospital are usually social workers. And so who helps support those folks is always sort of like, oh, well, you guys are the one that do it. So do it for yourself, or some kind of flippant attitude about it. But now, more than ever, everybody is part of the trauma. So how do we, all of us are experiencing this. So how do we provide and respond so that we can continue to move forward and be the helping professionals that we aim to be? Who else has some concerns around that, whether it's personal or just about how, in like an organizational context, how are we able to address needs and shore up the providers?
Hey, Mary. I know that when a lot of this was first going on, and I've put the otters in the background now. I figured that was appropriate for us as social workers. But when this first was going on, one of the things that we were getting a lot of questions about specifically was from social work managers, and how do you manage staff anxiety and kind of that continual flow and access to information when there wasn't definitive answers at that point, while still trying to maintain your own balance for yourself. We know that there was a lot of struggle with that, at least for those first couple of weeks. It's somewhat died down. I think now that we've gone past month one, I think most folks have figured out how to adjust at least enough to manage their clients, and the switch to telehealth, I think, has happened for most people at this point. But I think what we're seeing now, and I talked about this at our meeting earlier today, was, and I saw National Geographic put an interesting article out that I put on the NASW Facebook page earlier today, but it's about things like Zoom fatigue. So now that we're using technology constantly, what additional problems may that potentially cause for folks? And so that can be anything from your clients who may not be able to use technology for a variety of reasons, or the multitasking that may be involved in some of these capacities is challenging for folks, as well as the different, you're not able to read social cues when you're doing therapy versus on a telephone platform or an audio-only platform. And then finally, you know, I think with using platforms like Zoom and other things where you're visibly present constantly, the kind of expectation to be quote unquote on all the time. And so how do you manage that? And I think it might have been Julie who was telling in the last meeting, but you know, sometimes at the end of the day, you don't want to talk to anybody on the phone anymore. You're kind of phoned out for the day. And so what does that mean for your own social interactions, talking to your family, your friends, your regular checking in, how we may just be burnt out at the end of the day in a very different way than we were before.
Right. Right. This is about self-advocacy too. Thank you, Dwayne, for sharing that. I mean, you know, some people have productivity levels that they have to meet to maintain their employment. Like you have to see so many clients, you have to do so much, so many billings. That's not necessarily possible or healthy in this time. For me, I know everything seems to take a little bit more time. For somebody else, maybe it's easier. But looking at, like I said, this is a great time for doing some macro work and thinking about how do we take care of ourselves as professionals. I know a lot of the students at U of M were really disappointed that they got pulled from their physical field placements. And my response to them is, we need you, this is not your time yet. We need you to enter the field fully trained, energetic, fresh, and eager. This is not your time yet. It's coming though. If there's nothing else on it, I know we're getting very short of time. Let me move forward to the next section real quick, which, oops, did I move that? This is our last one, and it's responsibilities to the broader society. And I think a lot of folks never get back to this last section in the Code of Ethics. But this is all about now. It's about that we're supposed to be working and available and addressing public emergencies. It's also about how we engage the public with participation, through our participation with them in education. The idea of emergency services, whether it's your job or volunteerism, is important. And this is also about social and political action. In general, my first thoughts were that there's a lot of unclear employment rules that sometimes hold people back. Like how can I be politically involved? Some jobs have some fairly tight restrictions about your own personal activities in general. However, as long as you're not using your employee address or title or position, like saying, oh, I'm a professor from U of M, I can do any political action I want. So you do want to make sure that you understand your own HR rules and if you have contracts. I put interpersonal stressors and time. Time's always a barrier for social workers. We have so much on our plate typically. And then interpersonal stressors relates back to where are we at, you know, what's our capacity to continue to do and move forward. Any thoughts about that? I guess my final words will be, since I know that we're ending, my portion is scheduled to end at 2. My final portion is take care of yourself. And if you have any capacity, consider doing some of the macro work to empower and assist you while you're doing the interpersonal practice. It's important, and it's a great time to have your voice heard.
Mary, I did want to relay a few of the comments that have come through on the chat. So a couple
Sure.
of them are around telehealth and kind of the taxing parts of that. So Claudia has said, I'm busier than I was before telehealth because so much of my time has been devoted to navigating technology and helping clients and students with that technology. Joy has said, I'm part of a private practice telehealth group online, and the consensus is that telehealth sessions are more tiring than face-to-face. And it sounds like it looks like there's some agreement with that. Simona says, by the end of an 8-hour telehealth day, I'm ready to go to sleep for the night, and it's only 5:30. Yep, absolutely. Joy is doing 5 to 6 sessions compared to 8 to 9 sessions. And then Michael gave some advice. I used to work in a call center for seniors. One thing we were taught was for self-care preservation, take a few minutes after each call to stretch and gather your thoughts. When you take calls one right after another, it contributes to burnout. Also, talk to somebody when you feel overwhelmed. And I can definitely echo that. I think that this is a really good time for us to be checking in with our colleagues. And, you know, if you don't have that social work support network, that's where, you know, at NASW, we hope that we can help provide that for you. And if you need help finding people in your specific area of practice or in your region, we want to help be that effort.
Hey, Dwayne.
Yeah.
Ken Sherman, how are you? Can you hear me?
You are on.
Oh,
Yes, Ken, I can hear you.
Say, hi. One thing that we didn't discuss, or I just thought about, was with a pandemic, you know, the ending and the beginning, or the beginning and the ending are uncertain. With like a natural disaster, like a tornado, hurricane, that kind of disaster, you know, the beginning and endings are more clear-cut as it relates to, you know, our practice and, you know, how we change our practice and things like that. So that's like, I think, where we're at now with this pandemic, that it's just, you know, so uncertain, you know, when things are going to end, unlike if you had a natural disaster where you kind of know at some point the end's going to be in sight.
That's a great point. I hadn't really thought about it that way. It kind of goes to that old adage, the worst part of anything is waiting. And that's what we're all in, is some kind of waiting, weird hold pattern.
And the uncertainty.
Yeah. Yeah. If there are any questions or anybody needs any kind of consultation or whatnot, I will share. I'm going to end my screen and I'm going to put my email address and contact information in the chat box. And then Dwayne is also welcome to give that back. Since I stopped sharing, now I can see it. Thomas, tell us about the Pomodoro technique.
It's basically a time management technique. For every 25 minutes you work, you take a break for 5 minutes. You can Google it, but it's basically saying you need to take 5 minutes every half hour, 10 minutes every hour. It's sort of a organizational time management technique.
Awesome. I would encourage people to think about that. That's something that we've been talking about work is it's not possible for me I work longer and harder and feel like I'm less productive. So I put my email and my cell phone number. You're welcome to text or call or email me. Email is slow these days, so probably the fastest response is through a text message. And if you would include your name, I would appreciate it. But you're welcome to contact me for any questions or support. I appreciate each and every one of you, and thank you for what you're doing for our community. It's very, very important, needed work, and keep doing it. Keep going out and doing the good things.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, very much.
Very much.
Thank you. Dwayne, I'm going to sign off now so you can do yours. I've got another call to get to.
I think
I got to stretch first. Thank you.
Okay. I'll stretch at our desk for a minute.
Yeah.
Take that 5 minutes. But Julie, do we want to transition into any other our business for the aging meeting?
I guess just to offer the time remaining up, if anybody has anything specific to aging, questions, concerns, or even, hey, what should we do next month? We don't have any more speakers scheduled at this time, and so with the uncertainty of our current lifestyles, I would like to continue with the aging meetings. But at this point, I think I need some feedback from people. What are we looking for? How do we want things to move forward? So if you can either speak now and we can take notes, or if you can contact Dwayne at NASW office or myself. Dwayne's usually got my emails out there. Or I guess I could do what Mary did and put it down. Contact us and let us know, because I'm really not certain which direction to go in other than what we've been doing, but I don't know that that meets everybody's needs. So I'm gonna stop talking for a moment, open that up to everybody else for any kind of feedback, or if you have something you want to discuss.
And there was a question that came in through Claudia that I'll throw out to the group. And Claudia wonders, does anyone have resources for aging clients who are isolated at home? So Claudia, I don't know if you have any specifics in terms of types of resources that you're looking for, but if folks have ideas, feel free to open up your line or just drop them into the chat box.
I know that through some of the area agencies on aging, or some of these other community groups, maybe the senior centers, they have, some of them have programs that are kind of like a senior companion, but it's through the telephone, where they have volunteers who've received a little bit of training. And what they do is they just have a call list and they call people who just need some connection. So I would encourage people to contact their local council on aging or area agency on aging, whoever they have in their area, and just see if that resource is out there.
Yeah, it looks like the area agency on aging was one that Janice also recommended, Senior Alliance, SAGE, a couple other ones as well.
Also, AARP has resources and does a friendly visitor phone calls too, if you check their website.
Oh, thanks, Ken. I didn't know about that.
I had also seen, not in Michigan, but I know that in some states, some schools of social work, since field placements had been canceled for some students and some, especially in gerontology sites, that those students were doing wellness calls as part of their field sites to clients in various facilities, which I thought was a great idea and use of student time. I know most students are probably graduating here in the next couple of weeks or being done with the semester, but it might be something to ask your local school of social work about if there's any students that have availability to help out.
Right. Ken, you're on the line, and just for everybody's knowledge, Ken is kind of our liaison to the Elder Abuse Task Force that the state of Michigan has going. And I know last month, Ken, you said that the task force was kind of on hold, but I just want to give an opportunity. Is there anything that we know about or anything that, any updates that you have?
We're still on hold. We're doing some meetings with committees by Zoom, but as a task force as a whole, we haven't met in the last couple of months since the pandemic, issue started. So we're just kind of on standby. But if anybody has any issues or concerns as it relates to elder abuse and neglect that they would like addressed for the task force, please feel free to email me at kens248@aol.com. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. And maybe you could put that in the chat space, your email address, or if and you can also, people can let myself or Dwayne know, and we can forward that on to Ken also. So if it's at a later time, but something comes up.
Ken, I had a question for you. This is Bridie Johnson from Detroit.
Hi.
Hi. Has there been any guidance in the sense of like nursing homes that are having staff come in, and it could have been something I missed at the beginning of the presentation, but any guidance on like, should we be calling Adult Protective Services or letting people that, have known COVID cases work if they're not having symptoms, things of that nature?
Yeah, I would call Adult Protective Services and or the health department of the county that the nursing home is in. It might be faster to make the initial call to the health department and then also make a follow-up one to Adult Protective Services Central Intake. But you probably would get a faster response, at least initially, at this point with the health department of the county the nursing home is located in.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Janice, I'm seeing your recommendation or a question for maybe a guest speaker on telehealth or a guest doctor on medical conditions and social work interventions. So we can definitely put that down and see what we can come up with. I'm gonna write it down so I don't forget. Okay, does anybody have anything else for today or for future meetings? All right, well, I appreciate everybody hanging in there. As Mary said, all the work that is being done, social work is the most awesome of all professions. And I appreciate all of you colleagues out there doing the good work. Take care of yourselves. Dwayne, you have anything?
I just want to thank everyone for coming. The only thing I'll just plug real quick, if you haven't voted in the chapter elections, please do that. It's open until May 20th. I put the link in the chat box, but it's also on the NASW homepage. We just want to get as much member participation in that. we are going to be doing the clinical peer support group every other Friday. Every other Friday is likely going to be when that happens at the 10 to 11 or 10 to 11:30 time slot. So if you're interested in also joining that, there'll be more information out soon. And then we'll be doing our regular member check-in, which we were doing every Friday, which will happen every other week starting next Friday. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. We want to have as many opportunities for folks to stay connected during this time as possible. So just please be on the lookout for those emails from us. And then if you have additional ideas, either shoot them over to me, or if they're specifically related to the aging group, send them over to Julie or myself. And we appreciate everybody reaching out and sharing their expertise during these times. It's been much appreciated.
Great. Okay, and I saw the comment about aging with traumatic brain injury, so I wrote that down too. We'll see what we can do. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.